I just want to welcome everyone to the interview with Abbey Brau here at the Cycling with Summit, celebration of people coming together on bikes, celebrating diversity and breaking down barriers. I myself right now am in Charlotte, Vermont, and I know I'm joined with Abbey, who joins me on the other side of the coast up in Anchorage, Alaska. And before we dive into some of the questions, I just want to thank Ortlieb and Rad Power Bikes, along with our other brands and Patreon supporters that allow us to do what we do at Miles of Portraits, which is document humanity 1 mile at a time. So we go around the country and most recently India, telling the stories of the people that we meet while riding our bikes. And it's a perfect segue into Abbey, because one of my favorite stories that I like to share is Annalise and I had the privilege of biking in Alaska, which if you're at Kaylee's talk before this, you heard a little bit about, but Abbey was moving to Alaska, and before she actually officially made it there, I told her, hey, by the way, you are the emergency contact for Annalise and I. And beyond just being a good friend, part of the reason is Abbey has type 1 diabetes, which myself, I've had it and or have it, and then so does Annalisa. And so I knew if we ever ran into something that she'd be a perfect person to help us out. And Abbey, I guess the first question I have for you is, in this summit this morning, it started off with Leo, who rides with one leg. And then we talked to Kaylee, who talked about being a fat cyclist or riding with a larger body, something that's physical. But what's interesting about type 1 diabetes is that it's completely invisible. You don't know who has it. And so you were the captain of this team of 20 people living with type 1 diabetes, the first ever amateur group to go across the country. And I was just wondering, what did it mean to you to be the captain of kind of that team?
I mean, it was an awesome experience. And I think it meant that, it was an opportunity for me to kind of encourage a group of, I had done other things prior that I proved to myself that you can really do anything with type 1 diabetes if you want to do it. It's definitely, it can be a barrier, but it can be a barrier you can work through. And so captaining that team was a cool opportunity for me to not only do something that I had never done before, so another thing for me to kind of prove to myself, yeah, I had ridden a bike, but not a ton, prove to myself I could do it, but also to kind of lead another group of people with type 1 to encourage themselves to get through that as well, and to kind of work through those challenges. And then outside of the team, it was really about, showing anybody who has type 1 or who has kids with type 1 that they don't need to worry about when their kid grows up, if they can play sports or if they can have a certain job that they want, that they really can. And the cool thing about that ride was that there were a lot of different stops along the way. We had different fundraising events. We were fundraising for a charity. So they put on some events for us to meet a lot of people who were a part of that or following that nonprofit as well. So we got to meet people, but also because we stayed along the way, every night we stayed somewhere, and we reached out to either the local cycling community or the local type 1 community. We got to meet so many families that had kids with type 1, or people our age that had type 1, or older adults that were just diagnosed. I think that's the most common misconception, was that you're diagnosed as a child, which is definitely not true. 50% of people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes are adults. I was diagnosed when I was 22. So, and there are moments, a lot of people can be misdiagnosed with type 2 because that was essentially the non-juvenile, we met people on the ride who were diagnosed at 70, who were diagnosed as teens. And I've got a little friend who wants to say, hey, she knows it's the end of the workday, and so she's like, it's time to be done with this. What are you doing? But yeah, so meeting people, I mean, that was the other great opportunity about that ride, meeting so many people and talking to them and sharing our stories, because there's 20 of us on the team. So we all had a different diagnosis story. We all had different ways that we managed our diabetes. We all had different struggles, and sharing that with each other and with other people was just so like inspiring. I mean, you know, you do it to like meet others, but like I learned so much. So not only did I learn so much about the different ways to manage type 1, but I met so many people and started to grow my type 1 network and really realize like there's a community out there that I can find. And that community is definitely what's like encouraged me beyond the ride to like do cool things, or, you know, to realize like it's not a black and white way to manage it. You know, you learn you have to advocate for yourself in the healthcare space too. Like I always was like, oh, I'll just do, like my doctor told me to get, you know, insulin pens. I got insulin pens, you know, and then that was it. And I didn't know that I could do anything different. Or like, then when I did get a pump, it's because I asked, and he's like, that'd be great. I'm like, why didn't you tell me sooner? Or just the way that people treat lows, you know, you don't just have to eat sugar. You could like turn your pump down, or like, I just learned so much. I don't know, that was a really long-winded answer to, it was just an incredible opportunity to meet people, to learn myself, and to educate others, both in the type 1 space and without. Because the last thing I'll say is that it's also given me a really cool opportunity to share my story and be comfortable talking about type 1 and sharing my story with people who don't have type 1 diabetes, which I think sometimes it's a confusing disease to talk about or to like explain to people, because there's so much. And even after 10 years of living with it, I still am like, what's the best way to explain this? And you get better at that, so that people can start to understand, you know, what it means, because it's a confusing disease, and that it's totally manageable and you can live with it and you can do some super rad stuff, but also it's deadly. Like, you know, like if I give myself too much or too little insulin in any given moment, that could have really dire consequences. Or if I get sick and my body can't handle the flu, you know, or something like that, then that could be just way more intense of an experience than someone without. So it's like a casual disease, but it's not at all. Like you said, it's kind of invisible in terms of like, I look and feel healthy, but sometimes I feel like crap and nobody knows it. The most visible part of the disease, I guess, would be like when you can see my insulin pump, or you can see my CGM, you know, 2 devices that I wear. But you can't always see those. So I don't know if that answers, but it was a lot.
There's a lot. And if, you know, if people were following me today on Instagram, you know, I was sharing a little bit, you know, cycling with type 1 diabetes, and I had untapped maple syrup, and I was like, every single bike ride I bring sugar, and that's to prevent me from potentially dying. And like, you say it with this like severity, but joking as well, because, you know, for people who are tuning in who've maybe not heard this disease, it's, you know, our pancreas has something like, it's an autoimmune disease, so we produce no insulin. And so what's normally pretty stagnant for people, for us, like a roller coaster is very normal. And like, we actually do carry sugar to prevent passing out, which can happen in 15 minutes and 30 minutes. You know, it's always on the back of our mind. And so a lot of us, we've always dealt with that everyday challenge kind of alone. And maybe, you know, I know your parents are tuning in, but what it really feel like to be surrounded by 19 others who truly got it, and maybe got to see it in other people for like the first time.
Yeah. So doing the ride and having, 19 other people with type 1 who, like you said, get it, was a totally life-changing experience for me. Just because I had never had that, you know. Up until the ride, like I, you know, I had a major, like everyone supported me in anything I had ever done, which is great. I have a great support system, but like you said, they don't get it. So then like meeting these, you know, strangers for the first time, and we had talked kind of like on a Facebook group prior to meeting for, you know, about 9 months, and then you start to see glimpses, and you start to like, somebody poses a question to the group that's like, hey, I had this weird issue. Does anybody else have this? And you're like, oh my God, yes. Like that's a thing. And then you meet, and you just like, you don't have to explain things. So I think with people, when you're with people that don't have type 1, and a lot of them really do want to understand, sometimes it's like, well, I'm having this issue right now and I need to explain it to you, but to explain it, what's happening, I need to explain like so many more things that like, it's just exhausting sometimes. And with type 1s, you can just say your problem and there's no explaining why. Or like one of my favorite stories is from the ride that kind of explains this, is like, so one day I was riding with 2 other women from the ride, and I don't know if I was just being like real cranky or just having an off day or what, but they were like, Abby, what is your blood sugar right now? Or I don't even know, you know, and I like checked it and it was like over 300. So for those of you who aren't familiar with type 1 diabetes, like typically someone with type 1 would want to keep their blood sugar in a range of like 90 to 120. So if I usually feel a high blood sugar if I'm over 200. If I'm over 250, I'll definitely have like dry mouth and I'll kind of feel like garbage. And one of the side effects of high blood sugar is that you can just be like emotional, and that could of course exhibit in any type of emotion, you know, crankiness or sadness or whatever it is, just irritability, and it was just like so clear for all of us in that moment, and they're both like, oh, okay, you're high, just take some insulin and let's move on. And then, you know, like 30 minutes later when I was back in a normal range, I was fine. And but like, even just me telling the story now, you know, that required so much more explanation. Whereas in the moment, it's just like, oh, you're 300. Okay. Just, we get it. Like, don't worry about it, you know? Yeah, I think, and like I said, the other cool thing about, I learned so much, just the different ways that people treat lows, or I was already kind of like in the endurance athlete space doing like long distance swimming events. And so I met, you know, a couple other people on that team who also did long distance events. And before that, I had talked to like maybe 1 or 2 other people with type 1 who did long distance stuff, who were dealing with like how to train for a long distance event and like have type 1. And then it's like, oh, now here's a new source right here in front of me. Like, we're riding together and talking about the challenges that we've both encountered on, like, I mean, she's an ultra runner. So like her long runs, my long swims, I mean, yeah, different sports, but honestly, like very similar in terms of execution and training. So that was huge for me, you know, to be like, oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. How could we troubleshoot this together? So that, I mean, yeah, and I like still talk to these people today, you know, like we text regularly, and I'm about like our frustrations or new challenges, even if it's just like, I know there's nothing they can do about me, that I've been like high every single day for a week and I can't figure it out, or if I have been having lows every single night, even if there's nothing they can do, or I know they're going to suggest all the things I've already tried, like just to know that they can just listen to my text, read it, and then like send me some emoji, and like I know that they sympathize with me and I know they get it. I don't have to explain to them why that's frustrating. Is really awesome.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, I think part of the summit about breaking down barriers is that we hear, you know, especially we just had Kaylee's talk where she says, you know, even just small microaggressions can prevent you from entering the space. And, you know, for people living with type 1 diabetes, you can go to your doctor and say, can I do this? And depending on who you're talking to, they might say like, no, or here's a lot of things to consider. And it can shut down the door for a lifetime. And you might not go back to that conversation ever, or it might be 5 years later or 10 years later. And that's a really true sentiment that I think, you know, I can personally feel in the type 1 diabetes space. But as I think we talked to the other speakers, you know, in one way or the other, they have experienced as well. And, you know, you guys had this team, but one of the final products was also a documentary that you can now watch on YouTube. What did having, you know, Beyond Type 1, this nonprofit, get behind you guys, produce this, and create this thing that actually does put direct visibility on type 1 diabetes, like, mean to you?
I mean, I think it just shows their support and understanding and encouragement of anybody living with type 1, that like you can do what you want to do, you can be what you want, which is a definite change from historically how people with type 1 have been told they have to live their lives. And we have to credit like the technology of the last, 5, 10, 20 years. It's changed the how you manage diabetes, has opened a lot more doors. So like historically you maybe would have more challenges and not have as many access to as many sports or careers and things. But I think there are definitely, I think that like the medical field is sometimes really behind on the education of what it means to be diagnosed with type 1. You still have people over the age, of 18 being diagnosed automatically with type 2, which is a problem. When I was in the ICU, just diagnosed with type 1, a nurse came in and said, so type 2, right? And I was like, no. And she was like, yeah, you're 22. It's definitely type 2. And I'm like, no, it's not. like you need to, okay, anyways. And so and there's nothing wrong with being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but you're going to have, they're two different treatment plans. And so how unhealthy for either person in either situation that the medical team doesn't know how you need to treat your disease. So I totally feel like I went on a tangent and I'm like trying to circle back to what I was talking about.
Like having a documentary where you have a lot of people diagnosed at a lot of different ages.
Yeah, so it just starts to so Beyond Type 1 producing it shows that they're like a modern nonprofit compared to some of the other nonprofits out there that are, I would say, like a little bit old fashioned in terms of how they approach the different types of diabetes. And to have them produce this, it like provides an actual, something people can watch to learn more about type 1. To not only learn about type 1, but also like if you have type 1 to be encouraged that you can kind of do anything, even if you have a doctor who's like, there's still doctors who will tell kids they really shouldn't be doing sports because it's too dangerous, which is not true. You just need to do it correctly. And two, so the other cool thing about Beyond Type 1 opting to do this was, one of the riders on our team, Walt, he brought the idea to Beyond Type 1, and he had done a cross-country ride with two different groups already prior, and he was the only one with type 1 in both of those groups. And he's like, I want to do this with a group of type 1 diabetics, as I know they can do it, and I want to feel like with the people that get it. And he brought it to like American Diabetes Association, he brought it to JDRF and to other, now I don't know if maybe there's another one, and said, hey, would you back this? Can you support this? And they're like, no, it's way too dangerous. 20 diabetics or however many can't go and bike across the country. Like, are you crazy? And he was just like, no, of course they can. And Beyond Type 1 kind of got behind it right away. Maybe too quickly because we learned a lot like as we were going, but like that's not even like, it's so cool that they were so enthusiastic and so excited about it. Because I think, like that's what when they posted about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds so cool. I don't even know if I could do it, but I'm just going to apply, so it's a really good support tool. And I think we all need that. People want to see themselves in media, right? And if you like, this is an opportunity for some kid or even an adult who's diagnosed later in life to see like, oh, look what these people with type 1 can do. Like there's a representation there that they can relate to.
And then a point of being able to see yourself in media, because I think it is true, and I think you are right in terms of the dangers. Like there are very real, tangible dangers of putting one person with type 1 diabetes out there, let alone 20 altogether. And it was pulled off. And now, if you have someone that's in the cycling community that says like, what's it like to actually bike with type 1 diabetes? It's like, you have this documentary, like Annalise and I were blessed where like she was on the cover of Adventure Cycling, like taking a shot of insulin, and you have actual graphs and like more explanations. But in terms of like a cultural icon, I feel like a lot of conversations where like people say like, what's type 1 diabetes? And you're like, well, do you know Nick Jonas of the Jonas Brothers? he has it. And I teased it on the Instagram, but there's a moment where you are dancing in a car with him and Jesse Levine, and like, can we just get like a little bit of that story, and then we can talk about some other things?
Oh yeah, yeah. Nick Jonas and I, we go way back to 2017. No, so we had, so on the ride we were kind of like, I'll try and describe. We were kind of like self-supported, but we don't. A lot of people bike tour. We were supported in that we didn't have to carry any of our like camping or clothing or anything on our bikes. We had 2 support vans that carried all of our gear and like our insulin and stuff like that. And that was just like the way that we did the ride. And so, but we drove the vans. So like every 4 or 5 days, 2 of us would be off the, or 2 or 4 of us, so it's 2 vans, 2 drivers, we'd be off our bikes and we would be driving the vans that day. So Jesse and I, whenever we had a van day together, we like to do like, well, we were calling it carpool karaoke, but it's more like van dancing. And we would put the GoPros like in on the dash of the van and like have it facing us and just like sing and dance to songs at, like in the car while we're driving across country. And of course, Nick Jonas songs, or the Jonas Brothers, they definitely like had songs rotated in there. And then we found out, so we had a lot of footage of us doing this. And we're like, it's gonna be great in the documentary. Who doesn't want to see that? And then we found out we were gonna meet Nick Jonas. And so we were like, oh my God, we need to have a dance party with Nick Jonas. And then like in the documentary, it'll be like us, and all of a sudden like Nick will appear and it'll be so cool. And so like I don't know, we got it to happen. And they were kind of like, they're like, okay, his people said that like, if you ask, when we met him, it was towards the end of the ride. And they're like, if you ask him if he will do it and he says yes, then you can do it. And so we're like, okay. So we're like casually walking out to the vans, and like Jesse and I like go up to him and we're like, hey, like we have a favor to ask. And he's like, okay. And we're like, would you, we do this thing, we explain it. We're like, would you like be willing to do a song with us or a few songs? And he's like how many? And we're like, I don't know, like 2 or 3. And he's like, how about 1 or like 30 seconds? And we're like, yeah, it's fine. So we did. He did 1 full song, and it was pretty awesome. So Jesse and I were in our normal spots, and then he went in the like this, second row of seats, and like was in the center, and then kind of like just like in between us. And we did the song Levels by the Jonas Brothers, which we asked him if it was about diabetes, and he did not. He didn't say it was, but he did say it wasn't. So we're gonna assume that it is. And yeah, it's pretty rad. You guys can find it on YouTube if you YouTube, I don't know, Nick Jonas Bike Beyond. There's like a dance sequence. Also, if you watch the documentary, it pops up in there too.
Yeah, Annalisa, that it is a claim to fame. It must be like semi surreal, since it is really like someone that we now kind of like, at least our generation gets to point towards, saying, hey, this celebrity, he also has this disease. And like, here you are in a van dancing with him. And I think of Leo, who I posted, Leo, so he lost his leg, and he says like, a curse can become a gift. And it's tough because like we have so many daily challenges where like you go on a ride and you're kind of afraid of like passing out and potentially dying, but then all of a sudden you have these gifts of a new community and these moments of dancing with Nick Jonas, and it's pretty miraculous. And and something I wanted to shift towards a little bit is, I think part of this summit and people who are showing up to this summit are trying to learn from other different people and find those points of empathy, just saying, okay, maybe I'm coming into this with something, or just like, I know that there's so many different experiences here. How do we build a better bike community? And we do have real challenges, whether it's on the bike or swimming. And so I was just wondering, if you're on a group ride, you have some of your friends out here in Anchorage, what is it actually like to ride with someone with type 1 diabetes, and how can someone be supportive towards them?
I mean, I think it's really, it's different each day, right? Like some rides might not have any glimpse of diabetes whatsoever. Um, and then some rides might be completely canceled because of diabetes. And so I think it's just kind of understanding that. Like, I think the hard thing for me is I always worry that like people don't understand that it is so manageable, but it's also such a hot mess that you can like kind of do the same thing every day and have different outcomes. And I always feel like if I'm having like a bad diabetes day, that like people are like, why can't she like just figure this out or get it under control? Or like, why is this like so hard? She's had it for so long, you know, or like that I'm like, I don't know. And I'm sure people are not thinking about that, but like you're always like self-conscious about like, I'm always self-conscious about like holding up a ride if I have a low blood sugar, or we were talking just before this about how I've like definitely ridden through, when I'm on rides with new people, I have ridden through low blood sugars because I'm like, I'm not asking 10 strangers to stop here and wait 10 minutes for my blood sugar to come up, you know, like I just shovel some sugar in and go and like hope for the best, which works usually. It's worked most of the time for me. It's not been an issue. But I guess, yeah, if you're riding with someone with type 1, you know, just if you know that they're type 1, I think it's just kind of respect their cues, I guess. If they're really, most people I think are probably pretty open to talking about it or to answering questions. I certainly am, probably, like I probably say more than people really care to hear. But I think too, sometimes it's like, you know, I get annoyed if people are like constantly checking in, but then I'll also get annoyed if they never check in. Which is so ridiculous. I don't even know what, I'm probably not even great to like give you advice on how to like ride with someone with type 1, because I feel like depending on my mood, I'm going to have a different reaction. But I think it is read their social cues. If you know, or ask them if you're going to be riding with them a lot, be like, do you want me to check in with you? Or do you want me to leave you be? And even like, I know my friends kind of do this naturally. They do it great. And they do check in. And if I say like, nope, I'm totally good, then they're like, cool. And I certainly don't mind if they're like, how are you doing? Like, what are your blood sugars at? And they're like, they don't like make me check, right? Like if I'm just like, oh, I'm fine, I'm like, I started high, they're like, okay, cool, as long as you feel good. They like trust me to like know what I'm doing, which is cool. And they're definitely willing to like hang out and wait if I'm like, I need a second or I need a minute. And the other thing I would say too is like there was another moment because of the fear of like holding up a ride. Like there was a moment recently or this summer when, you know, we had just got to the top and my blood sugar just tanked. And of course, I didn't really know why, because I was like eating all the sugar I had and whatever. And it was just one of those days. And we waited for like 10 minutes and they all hung out with me. And it still really wasn't coming up. So I was just continuing to eat sugar. And I know how long it's going to be another 15 minutes before I was low enough that I didn't feel comfortable riding down we were like kind of on some downhill only trails that I wanted to have fun with. So I was like, I don't feel comfortable going down these, but you guys, it's going to be another 15 minutes. And I felt comfortable enough like waiting at the top by myself. So like, I was like, you guys go. And they were like, no, we'll wait. And I was like, nope, you guys go. Enjoy it. And like that too, let like them actually going, it doesn't make me feel bad. It makes me feel better that I'm not holding up their ride. They can go have fun. They trust me that I like know what I'm doing and I'm feeling safe. And they, you know, then they looped around and came back and then we could all go down together. So I don't know, talk about it, you know, make sure that person feels comfortable with you. I know that there's always somebody with snacks. I know people bring extra snacks. I feel like there's been so many rides too where I try and bring snacks, but sometimes I forget, and I usually don't. But you know, it's kind of that like you get exhausted from being diabetic, right? So you're just like, I'm just running out the door. I don't care to refill my little snack bag, or I just like want to get a quick ride in, so who cares? And I've been on rides with, you know, women who like group rides. I knew some, didn't know some, where I've been like, sorry you guys, I'm low and I just need a minute. I only have one snack left, so I might have to turn back. And there's been like 3 people there who are like, oh, I have snacks. And they like, you immediately snacks are in your face. I find a lot of like super rad nurses ride bikes and they always have lots of snacks. I don't know. It's just a thing. So thank you, ladies, or gentlemen, if you're a nurse. You guys are all great. So yeah, you know, just read cues and don't push, but also feel free to ask questions. I would say if that person's comfortable, they want you to like know and not make assumptions, I guess.
Mhm. I think one one like important takeaway that I'm always trying to explain to people is that often food or carbohydrates can be more important for someone who's a cyclist with type 1 diabetes than water, because like our situation can get quickly like truly treating something with an apple or like some maple syrup can instantly prevent a low blood sugar that is on the way towards fainting. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's like, if you kind of know that you're going to be with a cyclist that has diabetes, like it really does make us feel a lot more comfortable if you bring like an extra snack, as Abby was saying, because it's like every half an hour, your body's burning a certain amount of carbohydrates. And it's like hard to explain your full medical condition, but you're like, this can really bring me home or make me go further. Or there's times where you just like miscalculate for a moment. Um, I'll keep it. Abby has so many interesting things because she also has like there's Ironman in there, just to float that out if there's someone listening that wants to talk about Ironman stuff. But I was just wanted to talk, since you're probably the other person who's in Alaska, but just you know cycling, and you also have a big swim background. Um, but since we're in a cycling summit, I know since you moved to Anchorage, you've done a bunch of different rides and cycling, and so you had this huge cross country experience. But what does your bike community look like up there in Anchorage, and what kind of riding are you doing right now?
Well, first of all, I have to say the bike community in Anchorage, you guys, is the best. I mean, they are truly amazing. And I think specifically when it comes to um, not road biking, any other bike besides road bikes. Don't get me wrong, there's people who road bike here, and there's definitely places to ride a road bike, but like in Minneapolis, I could go multiple times a week on group road rides. Um, and here it's hard to find, there's no like set up group road ride that I really know of. Yes, I found people to ride with, but there's multiple times a week I can find a group of women to mountain bike with or to fat bike with. So I moved to Alaska 2 years ago and I had just a road bike, and I was one woman asked me, she's like, well, so like what bikes do you have? And I was like, oh, I just have a road bike. And she's like, well, that's gonna have to change really fast. And it did. And now I have a fat bike and 2 mountain bikes, which just happened. But no, so I totally fell in love with bikes on that cross country ride, and then have done things since. But now, since I moved to Alaska, I got on the fat bike kick and learned what it's like to do single track and to be off road. And you guys, I've fat biking, especially in a place that has like 9 months of winter. It's so fun. It's so great, and I have to really credit, the like finding the right. The bike community here is amazing, but the women who bike here are like extra amazing. And they are so open and inclusive and welcoming at any level. And I think that's what's really cool, because like single track riding on a fat bike, and then after winter was over, I got into mountain biking. That was all very new to me. And it is a different style of riding. And like on a road bike, it's like sit in the saddle, like don't stand up. And then mountain biking's like stand up. And I was like, how? Like balance your feet, bend your elbows. And like, there's this one ride, like my first time actually finding like single track stuff like clicked for me was like this one woman was so really good rider, but willing to spend the time with like beginners. And she just rode behind me and kind of like yelled the pointers at me. And it totally changed my whole ability in terms of like riding not on a road. And so I have to give them a lot of credit for like getting me totally hooked on mountain biking and fat biking. And there's just so much support here, which makes a big difference, because if you don't find those people, you don't feel comfortable just like attending these, or like how do you learn, if no one's willing to teach you? You can pay for lessons, but it's so much nicer if like somebody who knows what they're doing is like, yeah, I'll take an hour out, let's go ride. They're always just like, we just want more women to be out here riding. that's like their only motivation, which is so cool. And so now I've been doing it for a couple summers, and I'm trying to like kind of do the same thing and get my other friends who haven't ridden, who are starting to get into it. Like, I'm like, they're like, oh, we don't want to like, we're not as good. We don't want to go through. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'll go as slow. I'll go on easy ones. Like, I just want you to ride, you know? So it's contagious like that. And you like pass it on, which is really cool.
That like warm communities is hard to find, but I hope out of this summit and just sharing these stories that people feel more encouraged, one to enter, one to fix their bikes, but also pass that on. And I'll just encourage people to leave questions for Abbey, because I'll ask her like maybe one more, and then you guys can ask her directly. But I mentioned this to you before our talk. So Abbey's professional background, which is always interesting, one with type 1 diabetes, since it can happen to anyone randomly at any point in their lives, that you can have a very interesting mix of professions who happen to have type 1 diabetes, but then also in cycling, you know, anyone can become a cyclist. And so I was like, Abbey, I know you're a marketer, and I was just wondering, as we talk about inclusivity and diversity and breaking down barriers, if there's any brands or campaigns or things that you've seen pop up that you've like really been excited about, or just thought that, you know, if there's a brand listening now, you could be like, hey, here's a campaign to check out.
I think there definitely are brands doing things really well. I was just trying to think, you know, I would say from an actual like gear, like core sports, they are more in the triathlon space. They're so rad, you guys. They're for women only. Sorry guys, but they have every size. They are so inclusive of every ability in triathlon, whether you are wanting to do an Ironman or it's your first triathlon ever. They have a really rad like ambassador team that again has all abilities, and they also make really good gear. So I mean, that's a huge part of it too. Like there's you know, there's the marketing, but like if you can't back it up from the gear, then it's not really going to last. So they make awesome gear, cool designs, and they're just so supportive of their community and the people that are interested in them. So I would definitely check them out. And then from like an advertising perspective, well, I like what Athleta is doing. You know, they started to kind of do like what Aerie has done in the past. You know, they're showing different sizes of women. They're showing different ethnicities. They're showing people with different disabilities. There is people with insulin pumps and CGMs. Athleta did a thing, or there was this thing that went around where this little girl who has type 1 like wrote Athleta a letter, and she was like, I need a sweatshirt with a pocket, you know, right here or right here for my insulin pump at gym class. And they produced it, and it's now like in their line. And I'm like, that's just so cool, because it's like shows that they're listening. And then I think REI, actually, I know they have a lot of different brands, but as a brand themselves, they're producing some really awesome content that celebrates kind of like everybody getting outdoors, which I think is important, because those are the things that like are easy and like tangible for us to share and to start sharing other people's stories. They have a big enough platform that they can get it out there, whereas like just me sharing something might not. So I think that, and then anybody that's kind of like supporting stuff like this, like all the sponsors of this Cycling With, you know, you need to support different types of stories and share different types of content. And I think then even if a brand isn't necessarily producing the product to support that yet, they will, because they're going to start hearing, those voices are going to become louder, and they're going to start hearing the different needs from the people that are in their audience. So hopefully that like changes, because I know there's, you know, brands, you can say something, but you actually need to also put like the actions behind the words too. So
Abbey, we'll ask some questions for the audience, but I'll end it with you saying, you know, if there's kind of a short message that you could put out there on what it's like to cycle with type 1 diabetes or anything, what would you want to share with people?
You know, I think it's just like, try not to, you know, get discouraged by something that is challenging you. There's probably or hopefully a way for you to like work through it, or a community for you to connect with. And I would say, yeah, just kind of like, I hate when, like, I don't want people to feel like they can't do something. And so, I don't know, that's great. But like, try not to get discouraged because, I think you can go out there and you can do it, and it might look different, or it might, be different, or it might be more challenging. But if it's something that makes you happy, then I hope that you can like continue to do
I love that. Find
it.
it. Finding happiness, and that's the joy that I got today cycling around. Um, I know there's a few questions in the chat, Annalise. I don't know if you want to um, point out some people or ask them yourselves, but
Sure, yeah. There's a few questions just about like diabetes itself and how you manage it. Mal was asking if we can wear insulin pumps and CGMs while swimming. And Jade was asking about what your favorite low snacks are, so that, maybe you can talk about what it's like, because I don't know if everyone knows this, but Abbey is a big swimmer, and she actually, I forgot the 3 big ones that you did, but one of them was that you swam around the island of Manhattan. And I would be curious to know how you managed, like, how did you carry your low snacks, and were you wearing an insulin pump?
I was, yes. You can wear well, it depends on what insulin pump you have. That if you can wear it, it's not all of them are waterproof. I wear an Omnipod, and it's like a wireless, or like they call it tubeless. So it's not, how like you see insulin pumps with big long tubing. Mine does not have that, and it's controlled by a wireless like PDM or like a device, and it just sticks to me kind of like anywhere. I have it on my arms or my abdomen or lower back. And it's waterproof. It's totally waterproof. So I was wearing that when I did the Manhattan swim, and I wore it. It was on my abdomen, and I do that because then it's underneath my swimsuit. And because when you're swimming, if it's on my arm, it just like the water like pulls and pushes against it, so it can like come off easier, because it's just like on with adhesive, so it like sticks to you like a sticker. So I was wearing that. I was also wearing a CGM. You can wear a CGM. They are waterproof, but they work with Bluetooth technology, so you won't actually get any readings while you're swimming. I think that the Libre, though, this is a new, if there's other type ones here, there's a new CGM on the market that does work underwater, I believe, because it's not using Bluetooth, but I have not used that, so I don't know a lot about it. And then low snacks, I mean, honestly, like, I don't know if I have a favorite. I kind of like switch it up all the time, or it's just like whatever's available. Gummies are good. I like gummies. I like gummies a lot. Like for like by my bed, I keep juice, because it's like kind of the easiest thing for in the middle of the night. I feel like, although I have eaten gummies in the middle of the night, and then I'm never brushing my teeth after, so I'm like, this has to stop. So juice boxes are good, and gummies are probably my favorites. If I'm doing like long workouts, I'm probably going to use like a Cliff Shot Block, or like the Honey Stinger gummies, or things like that, because they're also going to have like some caffeine or some electrolytes or other like athletic-y type things that will sustain my energy longer. And for the swim, you can't have, I didn't keep anything on me, but you have a kayaker by you, and then you have like a motorized boat. And so I don't even remember. I don't think the kayaker did keep any low snacks with me, but I had a pretty scheduled like feeding regimen, because that was like a 7-hour swim. So like I had that planned out, ahead of time, and I fed, almost every 30 minutes or an hour, depending on where I was in the swim. And I drank Generation UCAN. So if you're a type 1, you might have heard of Gen UCAN. It's a long acting like super starch is what they call it. And it's supposed to just keep your blood sugar steady for a really long time, which it does. And it did for that swim. That's all I ate. I also like don't do this. This is before I like learned how to like be a long distance athlete with type 1 diabetes. Really, and the swim went great and I did it, but I turned my insulin pump off the whole time. Would not recommend that for that long of a swim. But it worked. So
I had one question for you. You're in Alaska right now, and you're just summer is over, I think tomorrow or the 21st. And you're slowly getting into like the times when you only have like a few hours of daylight. And I consider you to be such a positive person, and like you really make the most of the outdoors. And I'm wondering how you deal with the Alaska winters with COVID on top of that. I know you do a lot of fat biking.
I mean, I think we're all going to find out, but typically, yeah, it's getting outside. I think the biggest piece of advice I hear is find yourself a winter sport, you know. And I moved here with like the love of winter already. But yes, finding like fat biking that I can do after work, or I mean, there just is so many people here too that do get out after work and it's dark and they're still going and playing. You just put lights on your bike, it's fine. All the dogs have like these light up collars and like light up harnesses, and I think, but yeah, finding something to do and keep yourself active is really important, and it gets you through the darkest of the winters. But also by the time December, like what, 22nd hits or whatever, we're heading back towards the lights. So, which you don't really like see until like February, you know, but there's also Northern Lights and other cool things. So, and then by the time we get to March, you guys, we actually have like more light than everyone else. So like it's, I don't know, you're rewarded. But yeah. I think COVID will be interesting, and I hope that people can still get outside and enjoy activities.
I have one other question from Chad. How would you recommend getting to know other active diabetics? I would love to learn about the ride you did before the event occurred. I know which event that is, but
I think it's just like I can't say it's just meeting them, because obviously, but I mean, yeah, there's definitely like Facebook groups I think that you can chat with. There are different like events that are put on by some pretty cool nonprofits, and that's really how I've met like the bulk of my type 1 community. So the ride was obviously really big for me to meet people. And then other than that, I've attended Connected in Motion as a company who are a nonprofit based out of Canada, but they're in tandem with Beyond Type 1. They have what's called slipstreams, and so they're like kind of like long weekend adult camps for people with type 1, and it's like a combination of like outdoor activities and like speakers or panels or like conversation opportunities to talk about these different things that we all kind of deal with. And they are so awesome if you have the opportunity to attend one. After COVID, I would definitely recommend it. They are doing it's next weekend actually, they have a virtual slipstream. So I would check that out, because it might be a really cool way. It's going to be, I think like Zoom conversations like this, but you might be able to meet more people. And yeah, it's just like events that nonprofits have put on that I've like attended. Before I was doing the ride with Beyond Type 1, I did a lot of volunteer opportunities with the ADA's Tour to Cure. And so like I volunteered with them to like help put on that. And you meet a lot of, that's the other thing, volunteering for different things. If you meet like type 1 organizations, you actually like meet a lot of really cool people too. So yeah, I don't know. I just try and get involved. I also do like, I volunteer with Rowdy on Insulin. They're like a snow sports, they do ski and snowboard camps and surf camps for kids with type 1. So I guess that's not necessarily adults, but if there's one, you know, in your area, depending on where you live, that might be a way to volunteer and meet other adults who ski and snowboard with type 1, or to surf. Next summer they'll do one. So yeah, I just kind of like try and get involved in the activities that I'm into, plus type 1, and hopefully meet some like-minded rad humans. And I don't know, like just chat people on Instagram, you know. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes you forget that even just for a lot of these communities, that a lot of times the path towards finding people can either be entering a hashtag into Instagram, which I think is a blessing nowadays, especially if you live with an invisible disease where it's hard to find people. But I also think about Annalisa and I that actually met through a meetup group out in New York City, meetup.com, which who knows what they're doing in COVID, but it's like you sometimes forget that you can just take what you're looking for and just type it in. And that's kind of the blessing of today's digital world.
Absolutely. I would even say like there's a very generic mountain biking ladies Facebook group that is like people, I think, from all over the world. And recently somebody posted in there and she was like, are there any other type 1s here? Like, I have this issue when I mountain bike. What do you guys do? And like 10 of us were like, oh, I do this, I do this, I do this. And I was like, let's all get together and ride sometime. So that wasn't even a type 1 group. And there was definitely a lot of us there that all had that. So we were doing that.
Abby, I'm like, it's like, do we dive into your Ironman stuff? But maybe we could probably close this out saying what Ironman did you do, and maybe do you have anything on the horizon? And then we can probably call it a night here.
I first did the Boulder Ironman in 2018, and I finished in 17 and a half hours, and the cutoff to be a true Ironman is 17 hours. So I finished it, and I have a finishing time, but it was because they let me keep my timing chip, but technically I didn't finish it because you have to do it in 17 hours. So I did another one in 2019 because, like, come on guys, I wasn't gonna get that far and then not get it, right? So I picked a less challenging one than Boulder. And I did Arizona in 2019, and I cut off like over an hour and 15 minutes or so, and definitely became an Ironman. And so that was really awesome, you guys. It's a pretty rad event, and like it's the first event where I'm like, that kind of like cliche saying where people are like, oh, it doesn't matter if you finish, like if you just make it to the starting line, that's all that matters. And I'm always like, yeah, right, you need to finish the event. But no, this is like the first event where I'm like, oh my God, just making it to the finish line is like the event, you guys. Because the training is just so much, but you feel like a true like elite athlete, and just because you like walk through and they give you wristbands and backpacks, and then you get to walk around with like Ironman swag, and it's pretty rad. But and I don't know, as far as on the horizon, you guys, I don't have anything. I have ideas in my head of what I want to do next, but I've also kind of embraced this summer as just like a not training for anything, and just like really I've been mountain biking like a lot. That's like pretty much all I've done. I've swam a little bit, but not like I'm training for anything. So I do, now that I've like checked the Ironman box, I need to refocus on like the goals I had in swimming stuff. So I probably am looking at more of like long swims in terms of like next events, but I don't know, I haven't really made any decisions, nor have I gotten back to the pool in any sort of regular, consistent capacity. So we'll see.
Oh, one more thing. Someone was asking about what's the super awesome marathon in Alaska? I think they might be referring to the event in Seward where you have to like run up the mountain. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they're probably talking about Alaska Man, which I actually heard that that event is no longer, or the people who did it like sold all the assets. So I'm not sure if that's happening anymore, but they did do that the last 2 summers here, and it's basically like an Ironman on steroids, and you you swim like about 2 miles out of Seward. So the water's like, I don't know, 50 degrees. And they do let you wear like I think you have to wear like a full neoprene wetsuit, gloves, and hood, like, and booties, which in a typical Ironman, you can't wear booties or hood. You can only wear the wetsuit. So you swim that, and then you bike 113 miles, which is 1 more mile than the Ironman's 112. And then the real killer though, is you run, like 27 miles. So you run a marathon, but the first like 17 are a combination of like road and trail. There's also a hand tram that you have to use to get across a like river gorge. And then the last 10 miles are like up 2,000 foot elevation gain mountain twice or something crazy. And to the point where like the last 10, you actually have to have a buddy. Like they make you have a buddy go with you up the mountain twice because it's so intense. And you can only do that if you get there by like a certain time in the day. I went and watched part of it last year, and it's wild. I mean, there's some wild people here. They love their mountains. I'm terrible at climbing mountain or like hiking, but there's some really rad athletes here. So that's probably it. I don't have any interest in doing that event.
Yeah.
People do ask me, and I'm like, no, I wouldn't even make it. I wouldn't make it to the hike. Actually, maybe I could make it to the marathon-y hike, but I would not make it in the right time or up the mountain, probably.
Abby, it's incredible what you are capable of pursuing while managing type 1 diabetes. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and everyone else who's tuned in. Anyone that registers, which I guess is everyone here, you'll have access to all these interviews. And tomorrow I'm now adding half an hour to everything, at 12 o'clock, I believe, is the interview with Laura and Queso. And so that'll be fascinating to keep learning and keep exploring. And you know, we all can also remember that we can just go, you know, hike to the store and grab some coffee. It doesn't always have to be across the country. But no, I'm kidding. It's incredible what you've pushed your body to do, and the motivation that you have. So it's awesome to be able to chat with you again.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad to like be here chatting with you guys. It's so fun. I'm sorry we don't have more time. But yeah, if you guys have questions, like I like to talk about bikes and I like to talk about diabetes, so, or like any of this stuff. So if you're interested, I'm happy to chat. I try not to like bother my friends too much with it, but always happy to discuss random things like that.
That's like, right. We're always like, that's the interesting balancing of, you know, even a lot of this advocacy stuff is like, you have your passions, you have your personal life. So I appreciate the dedication you've given, at least the type 1 diabetes community.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I meet cool people like you guys, so it works out.
Well, beautiful. Good night, everyone. Abby, I'm guessing your Instagram is most likely out there, but Abbey Brau, and we'll be sending out info and resources from all of our speakers, so you guys will get a compilation of all of that at the end. And so if you ever find yourself in Alaska, there's a very supportive bike community out there.
Yes, let me know. We'll probably hang out. Cool.
Beautiful. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.